The colony ship New Sol moved through the dark space like a giant metal whale. Inside its white walls, 50,000 people slept in tiny rooms or worked in bright hallways. They had been traveling for 3 years now, heading toward a new world called Kepler 442b. Everyone on the ship hoped this new planet would become their home. Dr. Hana Kim walked down the long corridor toward her laboratory. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a cup of hot coffee in her hands. She was tired from working late again, but she loved her job as a xenobiologist. She studied alien life forms, though so far she had never found any real aliens to study. Behind her, small feet pattered on the metal floor. 4-year-old Mira ran to catch up with her mother. The little girl had round cheeks and bright eyes that sparkled with curiosity about everything around her. "Mama, can I come to your lab today?" Mira asked, tugging on her mother's white coat. Hana looked down at her daughter and smiled. "Of course, little one, but you must promise to be very quiet while Mama works." They entered the laboratory together. The room was filled with strange machines that beeped and hummed softly. Glass containers lined the walls, most of them empty. Hana had always hoped to fill them with samples of alien life, but their journey had been disappointing so far. Space seemed very empty and very quiet. Mira settled into a corner with her coloring books and crayons. She liked being near her mother while she worked. The lab felt safe and warm, even though they were flying through the cold darkness of space. That morning, Captain Dae Kim's voice came through the ship's speakers. He was Hana's older brother, and the person in charge of keeping everyone safe during their long journey. "Attention all crew members," his voice said. "We are beginning asteroid mining operations in Sector 7. All mining teams report to your stations." Hana looked up from her computer screen. The ship needed to collect materials from asteroids to keep their engines running and their air recyclers working. It was boring work, but very important for their survival. 3 hours later, something unusual happened. The mining team had been using large mechanical arms to scoop rocks and ice from a big asteroid, but this time they found something different. Hidden deep inside the space rock was an old, broken spaceship. The ship looked ancient. Its metal was dark and covered with strange symbols that no one could read. But inside the wreckage, the miners found something that made them call Dr. Hana immediately. "Dr. Kim, you need to see this," said Bowman, the lead miner. His voice sounded excited and a little scared. "We found something that looks like an egg." Hana hurried to the cargo bay, where they brought all the collected materials. Mira came with her, holding tightly to her mother's hand. When they arrived, Hana gasped at what she saw. The object was indeed shaped like an egg, but it was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was about the size of a football and seemed to be made of some kind of living metal. The surface was smooth and dark, but patterns of blue and silver light moved across it like slow lightning. "Where exactly did you find this?" Hana asked, pulling on her protective gloves. "It was in the center of that old ship," Bowman explained. "The ship looked like it had been there for thousands of years, maybe longer, but this egg thing was sitting in what looked like some kind of special chamber." Hana carefully lifted the egg. It was warm to the touch, much warmer than it should have been after floating in cold space for so long. The light pattern seemed to pulse faster when she held it, almost like a heartbeat. "Can we keep it, Mama?" Mira asked, staring at the beautiful patterns with wide eyes. "We need to study it first, sweetheart," Hana said, but she was already thinking the same thing. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. The first proof that intelligent life existed somewhere else in the universe. They took the egg to Hana's laboratory. She placed it in a special container that could measure its temperature, check for radiation, and monitor any changes. The egg continued to pulse with soft light, creating pretty patterns that danced across the lab walls. For the rest of the day, Hana ran test after test. The egg showed signs of containing living tissue, but the readings were unlike anything in her databases. The metal shell seemed to be some kind of advanced material that could regulate temperature and protect whatever was inside. Mira sat nearby, coloring pictures but often looking up to watch the glowing egg. She seemed fascinated by the way the lights moved and changed colors. "It's pretty, Mama," she said softly, "like Christmas lights." As evening came, Hannah decided to work late again. She sent Mira to have dinner with Uncle Day, but the little girl returned an hour later with a plate of cookies and milk. "Uncle Day said I could stay and keep you company," Mira explained, settling back into her corner with a new coloring book. The laboratory grew quiet as the ship's night cycle began. Most of the crew was sleeping now, and only the essential systems hummed in the background. Hannah worked at her computer, trying to understand the strange readings from the egg. Suddenly, Mira looked up from her coloring. "Mama, the egg is doing something different." Hannah turned to look at the container. The light patterns were moving much faster now, and the egg itself seemed to be getting brighter. She quickly checked her instruments. The temperature inside the container was rising, but not to dangerous levels. "Stay back, sweetheart," Hannah said, moving closer to observe what was happening. The pulsing lights grew brighter and brighter. Then, with a soft cracking sound, a thin line appeared on the egg's surface. The crack spread slowly, creating a pattern like a spider web across the dark shell. Mira stood up, still holding her crayon. "Is something coming out, Mama?" Before Hannah could answer, a small piece of the shell fell away. Through the opening, they could see something moving inside. Something alive. The egg was hatching, and their quiet life aboard the new soul was about to change forever. The shell cracked open with a gentle pop sound. Hannah held her breath as she watched a tiny head push through the opening. The creature was no bigger than a small cat, with scales that shimmered like jewels in the laboratory lights. Its eyes were large and golden, filled with intelligence that seemed far beyond its size. The baby creature tumbled out of its broken shell and landed softly on the padded floor of the container. It shook itself like a wet puppy, sending tiny drops of clear fluid flying. Then it looked around the laboratory with curious eyes, taking in all the strange machines and bright lights. Mira dropped her crayon and moved closer to the container. "Oh, Mama, it's beautiful," she whispered. The little creature's head turned toward Mira's voice. When it saw the small human girl, something amazing happened. Instead of being scared or trying to hide, the baby dragon made a soft cooing sound and pressed itself against the glass wall closest to Mira. "It likes you, sweetheart," Hannah said, amazed by what she was seeing. She had studied animal behavior for many years, but she had never seen anything like this. Wild creatures were usually afraid of humans, especially when they first hatched. Mira put her small hand against the glass. The baby dragon placed its tiny paw in the same spot on the other side, as if they were touching. Its scales glowed with warm golden light wherever Mira's hand was positioned. "Can I hold it, Mama? Please?" Mira asked with big, hopeful eyes. Hannah was worried about safety, but all her instruments showed that the creature was not dangerous. Its body temperature was normal, it showed no signs of illness, and it seemed completely calm around humans. "Just for a moment," Hannah said, carefully opening the container. The baby dragon immediately climbed up Mira's arm and settled on her shoulder, purring like a contented kitten. It nuzzled against her neck with its soft snout, and Mira giggled at the tickling sensation. "What should we call him, Mama?" Mira asked, gently stroking the creature's smooth scales. Hannah thought for a moment. The creature was clearly male, and he seemed so peaceful and gentle. "What do you think we should call him?" "Jiho," Mira said without hesitation. "His name is Jiho." The baby dragon's eyes brightened when he heard the name, and he made happy chirping sounds. It was as if he understood that Mira had given him something special, an identity, a place in their small family. From that moment on, Jiho refused to leave Mira's side. When bedtime came and Hannah tried to put him back in the container, he became very upset. He cried with sounds that were part animal whimper and part human sob. Mira also started crying, reaching for her new friend. "Please, Mama, he wants to stay with me," Mira pleaded. Against her better judgment as a scientist, Hannah allowed Jiho to sleep in Mira's room that night. She placed a soft blanket on the floor next to Mira's bed, but when morning came, she found both child and dragon curled up together. sleeping peacefully. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. Jiho began to copy everything Mira did. When she walked on two legs, he tried to stand upright instead of crawling on all fours. When she ate with a spoon, he attempted to hold utensils with his small claws. When she spoke, he listened carefully and tried to make similar sounds. Within a week, Jiho spoke his first human word. "Mira," he said clearly, looking at his friend with adoring eyes. Hana dropped the test tube she was holding. It shattered on the floor, but she barely noticed. In all her years studying biology, she had never heard of any creature learning human speech so quickly. "Did he just say my name?" Mira asked, clapping her hands with joy. "Mira," Jiho repeated and then added, "Sister." The word came out perfectly clear. Not only had Jiho learned to speak, but he had also decided that Mira was his sister. From that day forward, he never called her anything else. News of the talking dragon spread quickly through the ship. People came to visit the laboratory just to see Jiho and hear him speak. Some visitors were amazed and delighted. Others seemed worried or scared. Captain Day came to see his niece and her unusual friend. When he entered the laboratory, Jiho immediately moved to stand between him and Mira, even though Day was family. "It's okay, Jiho," Mira said gently. "This is Uncle Day. He's good." Jiho relaxed, but kept watching Day carefully. After a few minutes, when he saw that the captain was kind to Mira, Jiho approached him cautiously. "Hello, little one," Day said softly, kneeling down to Jiho's level. "Uncle," Jiho said, copying what he had heard Mira say. Then he added, "Family." Day's eyes widened in surprise. This creature was not just learning words. He was understanding relationships and social connections. As weeks passed, Jiho continued to grow rapidly. He went from the size of a cat to the size of a medium dog. His wings, which had been tiny and useless when he hatched, grew stronger each day. His scales became more brilliant, shifting from gold to silver to deep blue, depending on his mood. But the most amazing change was in his behavior. Jiho acted less like a wild animal and more like a human child every day. He wanted to wear clothes like Mira, though nothing fit his unique body shape. He tried to sit at the table during meals and became upset when he spilled food. He even attempted to use the bathroom facilities like a human, though this was not very successful. "Mama," he said one morning, looking up at Hana with hopeful eyes. Hana's heart melted. She had become a mother to two very different children, and she loved them both completely. However, not everyone on the ship was happy about their unusual family. Some people whispered that it was dangerous to let a creature like Jiho live so close to humans. They worried about what might happen as he continued to grow larger and stronger. Their concerns grew stronger when an incident happened in the ship's recreation area. 3 older children were teasing Mira, calling her names and pushing her around. They said mean things about her monster friend and laughed when she started to cry. Jiho arrived just as one of the bullies shoved Mira hard enough to make her fall down. The young dragon's eyes began to glow with bright golden fire. He grew larger, his scales standing up like armor. A sound came from his throat that was part roar and part angry human shout. "No hurt, sister," Jiho said, his voice deeper and more frightening than usual. The bullies ran away as fast as they could, screaming about the dangerous dragon. But Jiho immediately shrank back to his normal size and gently helped Mira stand up. "Are you okay, sister?" he asked in his usual soft voice, carefully checking her for injuries. Word of this incident spread throughout the ship within hours. Some people said Jiho was a hero for protecting Mira. Others said he was too dangerous to live among humans. Hana knew that their peaceful life was about to become much more complicated. 6 months had passed since Jiho hatched from his mysterious egg. The new soul was now approaching their destination planet Kepler 442b. Everyone on the ship was excited about finally reaching their new home after such a long journey through space. Jiho had grown much larger during these months. He was now the size of a young horse, but he still acted like Mira's little brother. Every morning he would wake up next to her bed and say, "Good morning, sister," in his gentle voice. He still tried to eat breakfast with a spoon, though his claws made this very difficult. Dr. Hana had spent many hours studying Jiho's growth and development. Her research showed amazing things. Jiho's brain activity looked very similar to human brain patterns. It was as if his mind was rewiring itself to think like a human being instead of whatever his original species thought like. This is impossible. According to everything we know about biology, Hana told her brother Dae during one of their private meetings. But somehow Jiho is changing himself to be more human every day. Dae looked worried. As captain of the ship, he had to think about the safety of all 50,000 people aboard. Some families had come to him asking for Jiho to be locked up or even sent out into space. They were afraid of what might happen if he continued growing, larger and stronger. Maybe he's dangerous, Hana, Dae said quietly. Look how big he's getting. What if he loses control and hurts someone? He would never hurt anyone unless they threatened Mira, Hana replied. You've seen how gentle he is with her. He's more careful around children than most adult humans are. This was true. Jiho was extremely protective of all the young children on the ship, not just Mira. When babies cried, he would sing to them in his strange musical voice until they fell asleep. When toddlers fell down, he would gently help them up and make sure they were not hurt. But there were still people who remained afraid of him. They formed a group led by a man named Wu Jin, who believed that keeping Jiho on the ship would bring disaster to their new colony. On this particular morning, Captain Dae received an urgent message from the ship's long-range sensors. What he learned made his face turn pale with worry. All senior staff report to the bridge immediately, he announced over the ship's communication system. Hana left Mira playing with Jiho in their quarters and hurried to the bridge. When she arrived, she saw all the ship's officers staring at the main viewing screen with shocked expressions. There, orbiting around their destination planet, were dozens of massive alien spaceships. These vessels were unlike anything humans had ever built. They were sleek and beautiful, but also clearly very advanced and powerful. Each ship was at least 10 times larger than the New Sol. How long have they been there? Hana asked, her voice barely a whisper. Unknown, replied Lieutenant Sumi, the communications officer. But they're scanning us right now. They know we're here. As if responding to her words, the main screen flickered and changed. Suddenly they were looking at an alien face unlike anything they had imagined. The being had pale, almost transparent skin and 4 large eyes that glowed with cold blue light. Its features were sharp and angular, beautiful but also frightening. Human vessel, the alien said in perfect human language, though its voice sounded like wind blowing through metal. I am Commander Naris of the Valdorian Empire. This world is now under our protection. You will turn your ship around and leave this system immediately. Captain Dae stepped forward, trying to look calm and confident even though his heart was beating very fast. Commander Naris, I am Captain Dae Kim of the colony ship New Sol. We have traveled for over 3 years to reach this planet. Our people need a new home. Surely we can find a way to share this world peacefully. Commander Naris's 4 eyes seemed to glow brighter with anger. Your species is primitive and destructive. We have studied your history through the radio signals. You broadcast into space. You make war against your own kind. You poison your own planet. You spread violence wherever you go. This beautiful world will not suffer the same fate as your Earth. We've learned from our mistakes, Dae said desperately. We want to build a better society here. Please give us a chance to prove that humans can change. Impossible, Naris replied, coldly. We have encountered many young species like yours. They all make the same promises. They all bring the same destruction. Our solution is always the same. You will leave now, or you will be removed by force. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Through the viewing screen, they could see the alien ships moving into attack positions around their small colony vessel. Lieutenant Sumi looked up from her station with fear in her eyes. Captain, they're charging their weapons. I'm reading massive energy buildups across their entire fleet. Down in their quarters, Mira felt something was wrong even though she could not understand what was happening. Jiho sensed her distress and moved closer to her. What's wrong, sister? He asked gently. I don't know, Mira said, looking toward the door. Everyone seemed scared about something. Jiho's scales began to change color, shifting from their usual gold to a deeper, more intense shade. His eyes started glowing softly, and Mira noticed that he seemed to be listening to sounds she could not hear. "Jiho, are you okay?" she asked, placing her small hand on his large head. "Bad things coming," Jiho said quietly. "Angry people want to hurt our family." Even though no one had told him what was happening, Jiho somehow knew that danger was approaching. His protective instincts were growing stronger, and his body was preparing for something he did not fully understand. On the bridge, Captain Day was trying to buy time while his officers worked frantically to find a solution. The alien ships were slowly surrounding them, cutting off any possibility of escape. "Commander Naris," Day said, opening communications again. "Before you destroy us, I must tell you something important. We have discovered something on our journey that might interest your people. We found evidence of an ancient spacefaring race." This seemed to get the alien commander's attention. His glowing eyes focused intently on the screen. "What kind of evidence?" Naris demanded. Day looked at Hana, who nodded slightly. They both knew this was a desperate gamble, but they had no other choice. "We found a ship very old embedded in an asteroid," Day explained. "Inside that ship was an egg containing a creature unlike anything we had ever seen. The creature is still alive, and it has formed a bond with one of our children." "Commander." Naris was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice sounded different, more interested, and much more dangerous. "Show us this creature immediately. If you are lying to save your worthless lives, your deaths will be much more painful." Hana felt her heart sink. She realized they might have just made their situation much worse instead of better. Commander Naris stared at Captain Day through the communication screen with his 4 glowing eyes. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever before the alien commander spoke again. "You will prepare this creature for immediate inspection," Naris said in his cold voice. "We are sending boarding teams to your ship. If this creature is what I believe it might be, then your situation has become much more complicated." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew in worried silence. Captain Day turned to his sister with fear in his eyes. "Hana, what have we gotten ourselves into?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," Hana replied, but she was already thinking about Jiho's strange origins. The ancient derelict ship, the advanced egg, and Jiho's incredible abilities all suggested that his species was far more important than they had realized. Within minutes, sleek Valdorian ships began docking with the new Sol. The alien boarding. Parties moved through the ship's corridors with smooth, efficient steps. They carried scanning devices that hummed softly as they searched for signs of the mysterious creature. Sub-Commander Kyle led the main search team. He was younger than Commander Naris, but just as cold and calculating. His pale skin seemed to glow with its own inner light, and his 4 eyes moved independently, taking in every detail of the human ship. "This vessel is primitive," Kyle observed, to his team. "How did such a backward species manage to find a keeper egg?" The word keeper made several of his subordinates exchange worried glances. In Valdorian history, the keepers were legendary beings from the distant past. They were said to be dragons of incredible power who had once protected younger races throughout the galaxy, but the keepers had supposedly been extinct for thousands of years. Meanwhile, in their quarters, Mira sat on her bed while Jiho paced nervously around the room. His scales kept changing colors, shifting from gold to silver to deep blue. His eyes glowed brighter than usual, and he made soft growling sounds that Mira had never heard before. "Jiho, what's wrong?" Mira asked, reaching out to touch his head gently. "Danger coming, sister," Jiho said, his voice deeper than normal. "Bad people want to take Jiho away from family." "Nobody will take you away," Mira said firmly, hugging his large neck. "We're family, and families stay together." But even as she said these brave words, Mira could hear strange footsteps in the corridor outside their room. The footsteps sounded different from human steps, more rhythmic and precise. Dr. Hana hurried toward their quarters, followed by Captain Day and several crew members. She wanted to reach Mira and Jiho before the aliens found them, but she was too late. Sub-Commander Kale and his team had been following the energy readings from their scanners. The readings led them directly to the door of Mira's room. Kale placed his hand on a small device that could see through walls, and what he observed made his eyes widen with shock. "Commander Naris," Kale spoke into his communication device. "I have found the creature. You need to see this immediately." "What is it?" Naris's voice crackled through the device. "It is indeed a keeper," Kyle replied, his voice filled with awe and fear. "But something is very wrong. This keeper has bonded with a human child. Such a thing should be impossible." Inside the room, Jiho suddenly stopped pacing. His head turned toward the door, and his nostrils flared as he caught the scent of the aliens outside. "They're here," he told Mira quietly. "Jiho must protect Sister now." Before Mira could ask what he meant, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Sub-Commander Kale stepped into the room, followed by 4 other Valdorian soldiers. Their pale skin seemed to glow in the soft lighting, and their multiple eyes focused on Jiho with intense interest. But instead of cowering or attacking, Jiho did something that surprised everyone. He stepped forward and placed himself directly between the aliens and Mira, then spoke in clear, perfect human words. "You cannot hurt my sister," Jiho said, his voice calm but filled with determination. The Valdorian soldiers froze in complete shock. In all their history, they had never heard of a keeper speaking any language other than their own ancient tongue. And they certainly had never seen one protect a single individual with such obvious devotion. Sub-Commander Kale recovered from his surprise first. "Impossible," he whispered. "Keepers do not bond with primitive species. They are guardians of cosmic order, not protectors of individual beings." "Jiho is not a cosmic anything," Mira said, stepping out from behind her friend. "He's my brother, and he loves our family." The small human girl, showing no fear in the presence of advanced alien warriors, shocked the Valdorians even more. In their society, children were taught from birth to show proper respect and fear toward authority figures. At that moment, Dr. Hana and Captain Day arrived at the doorway. When Hana saw the aliens surrounding her daughter and Jiho, she immediately moved to stand with them. "Please don't hurt them," Hana said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Jiho has never harmed anyone. He only wants to protect Mira." Sub-Commander Kale studied the scene before him with growing confusion. Everything he was seeing contradicted fundamental Valdorian beliefs about natural order and species hierarchy. "The creature must come with us for proper evaluation," Kale announced. "Commander Naris will determine what must be done with this aberration." "No," Jiho said firmly. "Jiho stays with family." His scales began to glow with golden light, and the air around him started to shimmer with energy. The Valdorian soldiers instinctively took a step backward, their scanning devices registering power levels they had not expected. "This is not a request," Kyle said, trying to maintain his authority. "You will comply, or we will use force." But before anyone could move, something unexpected happened. Mira walked directly up to Sub-Commander Kyle, looking up at his tall, intimidating form with curious eyes instead of fear. "Do you have a family?" she asked innocently. "Do you have someone you love more than anything in the whole universe?" The question seemed to confuse Kale more than any threat or display of power could have. In Valdorian society, such emotional attachments were considered weaknesses that had been bred out of their species long ago. "I do not understand the relevance of your question, small human," Kale replied stiffly. "Jiho loves me, and I love him," Mira explained simply. "That's what families do. They take care of each other and never let anyone hurt the people they love." Several of the younger Valdorian soldiers exchanged glances. Something about the child's words stirred feelings they had been taught to suppress, emotions their society claimed were primitive and destructive. Sub-Commander Kale activated his communication device again. "Commander Naris, the situation is more complex than we anticipated. The Keeper refuses to be separated from the human child, and the child shows no fear of us whatsoever." "Then bring them both," Naris replied coldly. We will examine this impossible bond and determine why a keeper would abandon its true purpose for attachment to a single primitive being. As the Valdorians prepared to escort Mira and Jiho from their quarters, none of them noticed that Jiho's scales were beginning to show patterns that matched ancient symbols carved in their oldest temples. The young dragon was awakening to powers that had been dormant for millennia, powers that would soon challenge everything the Valdorians believed about strength, duty, and the true meaning of protection. The Valdorian transport ship was unlike anything Mira had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living light, and the floors felt warm under her feet. Everything was perfectly clean and perfectly quiet. Even the air tasted different somehow, purer than the recycled air on the new Sol. Jiho walked close beside Mira, his scales now a deep protective blue. His eyes never stopped moving, watching every Valdorian soldier and scanning every doorway they passed. He had grown even larger during the short trip from their ship, now standing as tall as an adult human at his shoulder. Dr. Hana held Mira's hand tightly as they were escorted through the gleaming corridors. Captain Dai walked behind them, his face grim with worry. They were being taken to meet Commander Naris, and none of them knew what would happen when they arrived. The other Valdorians they passed in the hallways stopped to stare at their strange group. Most of them had never seen humans before, and certainly none had ever seen a keeper walking peacefully beside a small child. Some of the younger aliens seemed curious, while the older ones looked disturbed by what they were witnessing. Finally, they reached a massive chamber with walls that stretched up so high Mira could not see the ceiling. At the far end of the room sat Commander Naris on what looked like a throne made of crystal and starlight. His 4 eyes glowed brighter than ever as he studied their approach. "So," Commander Naris said, his voice echoing through the vast space, "this is the impossible keeper who believes he is human." Jiho stepped forward, placing himself between Commander Naris and his family. "Jiho is human," he said proudly. "Jiho has human family. Jiho protects human family." Several Valdorian officers standing near the throne made shocked, gasping sounds. They had never heard a keeper speak with such certainty about anything other than cosmic duty and universal order. Commander Naris stood up from his throne and walked down the steps toward them. As he moved closer, Mira could see that he was much taller than any human, at least 8 feet in height. His pale skin seemed to glow with its own inner light, and his movements were perfectly graceful. "Young keeper," Naris said, stopping just a few feet away from Jiho, "you have been deceived by these primitives. You are not human. You are one of the ancient guardians, destined to protect entire star systems, not to waste your power on attachment to a single insignificant creature." "Mira is not insignificant," Jiho replied firmly. "Mira is most important person in universe." Commander Naris's eyes flashed with anger at this response. "You speak like a foolish child, not like the cosmic guardian you were born to be. This human child will live for perhaps 80 of their short years, then die and be forgotten. You could live for thousands of years, protecting millions of beings across the galaxy. How can you throw away such purpose for temporary attachment?" Before Jiho could answer, Mira stepped forward. Her small voice rang clear in the enormous chamber. "Because he loves me," she said simply. "And I love him. Love makes everything else important." The words seemed to hit Commander Naris like a physical blow. He took a step backward, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. Around the chamber, other Valdorians shifted uncomfortably. The concept of love was so foreign to their society that they had no proper response to it. Dr. Hana decided this was the moment to share her research. "Commander Naris, if I may speak," she said respectfully. "I've been studying Jiho's development for months. His bond with my daughter has not weakened him. It has made him stronger and more capable than he ever could have been alone." "Impossible," Naris replied, but his voice sounded less certain than before. "It's true," Hana continued, pulling out a small device that displayed her data. "Jiho's energy output has increased by over 300% since bonding with Mira. His healing abilities, his strength, his intelligence, all have grown far beyond what should be possible for his age." She activated a holographic display showing Jiho's remarkable development over the months. The data clearly showed that his bond with Mira had accelerated his growth and abilities in ways that defied explanation. Sub-Commander Kale, who had been studying the display intently, suddenly spoke up. "Commander, these readings match the ancient texts in our oldest archives." "What texts?" Naris demanded. "The forbidden histories, the ones locked away in the deep vaults," Kyle explained nervously. "They speak of keepers who achieved their greatest power not through isolation, but through bonds with other species. The texts were declared false centuries ago, but these readings suggest they might have been true." A murmur of shock ran through the assembled Valdorians. Their entire civilization was built on the belief that emotional bonds were weakness, that true strength came from logical detachment and hierarchical order. Commander Naris was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with uncertainty he had never shown before. "Even if this is true," he said slowly, "it changes nothing. This world belongs to the Valdorian Empire now. The humans must leave, and the Keeper will be taken for proper study and training." "No," Jiho said, and this time his voice carried a power that made the entire chamber vibrate. His scales began to glow with golden fire, and the patterns on his hide started forming symbols that several older Valdorians recognized from their most ancient temples. "Jiho will not leave family," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "If you hurt family, Jiho will fight." "You would fight the entire Valdorian fleet for one small human?" Naris asked, genuinely amazed by the concept. "Yes," Jiho replied without hesitation. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Mira began to feel sick. The stress of the situation, the strange air on the alien ship, and her fear for her family's safety all combined to make her very ill. She swayed on her feet and began to fall. Jiho was beside her instantly, catching her in his gentle claws. His scales blazed with brilliant golden light as he channeled healing energy through their bond. The light was so bright that several Valdorians had to shield their eyes, but the healing was more than anyone had expected. As Jiho's power flowed through Mira, she did not just recover from her illness. Her eyes began to glow with the same golden light as Jiho's, and for a moment everyone in the chamber could feel the incredible strength of their bond. The display of power was unlike anything the Valdorians had ever witnessed. This was not just a keeper protecting someone he cared about. This was something entirely new, a joining of two different species that created abilities greater than either could achieve alone. Commander Naris stared at the glowing child and dragon with growing understanding. Everything his civilization believed about strength, power, and natural order was being challenged by what he was seeing. "This is impossible," he whispered. But even as he said the words, he knew they were witnessing something that would change both of their species forever. Several of the younger Valdorian officers were staring at Mira and Jiho with expressions of wonder and longing. For the first time in their lives, they were seeing what it looked like when someone cared more about another being than about themselves. The chamber fell silent as everyone tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The future of both humans and Valdorians hung in the balance, waiting for Commander Naris to decide what came next. The golden light slowly faded from around Mira and Jiho, but the effect of what everyone had witnessed continued to ripple through the chamber. Several young Valdorian officers were staring at the pair with expressions their species had not shown for thousands of years. Wonder, longing, hope. Commander Naris stood frozen, his four eyes fixed on the small human girl who now seemed to glow with inner strength. Everything he had believed about the universe was crumbling around him like old stone. "This cannot be," he whispered, but his voice lacked its former certainty. Mira looked up at the tall alien commander with clear, honest eyes. "Why are you so afraid of love?" she asked gently. "Love makes everything better. It makes us stronger and braver and kinder." "Love is chaos," Naris replied automatically, reciting words he had been taught since childhood. "Love leads to war, jealousy, and destruction. We have evolved beyond such primitive emotions." "Then why do you seem so sad?" Mira asked. The question hit Commander Naris like a physical blow. He had never thought of himself as sad, but looking at this small human child and her dragon brother, he suddenly felt an emptiness inside himself that he had never noticed before. Around the chamber, other Valdorians were beginning to whisper among themselves. The younger ones especially seemed affected by what they had seen. Sub-Commander Kyle stepped forward, his voice uncertain but determined. "Commander," Kyle said slowly, "what if we have been wrong? What if the ancient texts were correct and emotional bonds actually make us stronger instead of weaker?" "Impossible," Naris said, but the words sounded hollow even to himself. At that moment, Jiho made a decision that would change everything. He had been listening to the conversations around him, and he could sense the confusion and conflict in the hearts of many Valdorians. They were not truly evil, he realized. They were simply afraid and lonely. "Jiho wants to show you something," the young dragon said, his voice calm and gentle. Before anyone could stop him, Jiho closed his eyes and spread his magnificent wings wide. His scales began to shimmer with starlight, and suddenly everyone in the chamber could feel what he was feeling. Through some kind of telepathic connection, every person in the room experienced Jiho's memories. They felt the moment he first saw Mira and knew immediately that she was his family. They experienced the warmth of being accepted and loved unconditionally. They felt the joy of protecting someone who meant more to him than his own life. But most importantly, they felt the incredible strength that came from that bond. Not weakness, not chaos, but power beyond anything they had imagined possible. For the Valdorians, who had spent their entire lives suppressing such feelings, the experience was overwhelming. Many of them began to cry, which was something their species had not done for centuries. They were feeling emotions they had forgotten they were capable of having. Commander Naris fell to his knees as the full force of Jiho's love for Mira washed over him. For the first time in his long life, he understood what he and his entire civilization had given up in their pursuit of perfect order. "We were wrong," he whispered, tears flowing from all four of his eyes. "We were so terribly wrong." The telepathic connection expanded, and suddenly the humans could feel the deep loneliness and fear that drove Valdorian behavior. They saw a civilization that had become so afraid of the chaos that emotions could bring, that they had cut themselves off from everything that made life meaningful. Dr. Hana gasped as she experienced the Valdorians' perspective. They were not cruel by nature. They were simply a people who had lost their way, who had convinced themselves that survival required them to become something less than what they were meant to be. "You don't have to be alone anymore," Mira said softly, walking over to where Commander Naris knelt on the crystal floor. She reached out and gently touched his pale hand with her small fingers. The simple gesture of comfort from a human child to an alien commander created another wave of connection through the room. More Valdorians began to remember what it felt like to care for others, to form bonds that went beyond duty and hierarchy. Sub-Commander Kale was the first to speak into the emotional silence. "Commander, perhaps we could learn from each other. The humans could teach us about emotional connections, and we could share our knowledge and technology with them." Other Valdorian officers began to nod in agreement. The rigid order they had lived under for so long suddenly seemed less important than the possibility of rediscovering what they had lost. Commander Naris slowly stood up, still holding Mira's small hand in his much larger one. When he spoke, his voice was different, warmer and more alive than it had been before. "Sub-Commander Kale is correct," he said. "We have much to learn from each other. The planet Kepler 442b is large enough for both our peoples." Captain Day stepped forward cautiously. "You mean we can stay? We can build our colony here?" "More than that," Naris replied, looking down at Mira and Jiho with something approaching fondness. "We propose to build something new together. A settlement, where both humans and Valdorians can live and learn from each other." Over the following months, the impossible became reality. The first integrated colony in galactic history began to take shape on the surface of Kepler 442b. They called it New Harmony, and it became a place where two very different species learned to become family. Mira and Jiho became symbols of what was possible when beings chose love over fear. Human children played with young Valdorians who were learning to laugh and cry and form friendships for the first time in their species' recent history. Adult Valdorians discovered the joy of caring for others, while humans marveled at the advanced technology and ancient wisdom their new friends shared with them. Jiho grew into his full power as a keeper, but he never forgot that his greatest strength came from his bond with his human sister. He watched over all the children of New Harmony, both human and Valdorian, teaching them that love was not weakness but the most powerful force in the universe. Dr. Hana established a research center where scientists from both species worked together to understand the amazing things that happened when different kinds of beings chose to become family. Their discoveries would eventually spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring other species to reconsider their own beliefs about strength, survival, and what it truly meant to be alive. Commander Naris, now simply called Naris by his friends, often visited Mira and Jiho in their home at the edge of New Harmony. He had become like an uncle to Mira, and she had taught him how to laugh, how to hope, and most importantly, how to love without fear. As years passed, New Harmony became known throughout the galaxy as proof that any beings could become family if they chose to open their hearts to each other. Ships came from distant star systems to see this miraculous place, where a human child and her dragon brother had shown two civilizations how to be truly strong. And every night, as the twin moons of Kepler 442b rose over their peaceful settlement, Mira would sit with Jiho under the alien stars and tell him stories about Earth, while he shared ancient dragon tales of distant worlds and cosmic wonders. They were family, and they always would be, not because they were the same species, but because they had chosen to love each other completely and without reservation. In a universe full of differences and conflicts, they had found the one thing that could unite any beings across any distance. They had found each other, and that made all the difference in the worlds.